Hello, I'm Molly, a licensed insolvency practitioner at Parker Walsh. And I've been in insolvency for over 20 years now, and I'm just going to run through the most common questions I get asked by directors where the company is insolvent, i.e. they can't pay their liabilities as and when they fall due, and the company is entering into creditors' voluntary liquidation. So the most common question I get asked is, am I personally liable for any of the company liabilities? And I appreciate that directors can be very worried about this. There are some horror stories out there, but generally speaking, no, you are protected. It's a limited company, and that's a separate legal entity to you personally. So the only time you would be personally liable for some of the company liabilities would be if you've given a personal guarantee to any of those creditors. So generally speaking, HMRC don't have personal guarantees. The bounce back loans didn't. But if you've maybe got a bank loan, that might be personally guaranteed, or some sort of business loan, they may be personally guaranteed, in which case, if the company goes into liquidation, they can rely on their personal guarantee. So it's important to know which creditors you've given a personal guarantee to, if you have. But if you haven't, no, the creditors can't come to you directly. The liabilities will be dealt with in the liquidation. The only other time that you'd be liable to pay personal money into the liquidation estate is if there's an overdrawn director's loan account, and that is where you owe money to the company. There's an existing loan. And it's exactly what it says. It's a loan. It's not yours to keep. You eventually have to repay it. So that would be repaid. So if there's a loan, you'd need to repay that. And then finally, if there's ever been any misconduct by the director, i.e. you've done something that you shouldn't have as a director with company funds, you may be personally liable to repay that. But if you're concerned about that, get in touch with someone like myself and we'll be able to guide you through it as to whether or not you are going to be personally liable for anything. But please be rest assured that generally directors haven't given personal guarantees, they don't have a loan account. In actual fact, what you find is they are putting money into the company and they've done everything correctly. They've done it in the best interests of the creditors, so there's no chance of misconduct there. So that answers that question, hopefully. And then the next question I get asked is, can I set up another limited company? Yes, absolutely, you can. So the only time you wouldn't be able to is if you'd been disqualified by the Insolvency Service, or you've taken an undertaking, which is an agreement with the Insolvency Service to not act as a director again. But generally speaking, the liquidation, yeah, absolutely, you can set up again. The government, in actual fact, wants you to do that because going forward, you'll be helping the economy by trading, you'll be hiring people, putting people into employment, paying wages. You'll be paying VAT, pay as you earn, and then hopefully, the next company is going to be really profitable and you'll be paying corporation tax on your profits, you'll be taking dividends and you'll be paying personal tax. So yes, you can set up again. If the company goes into liquidation, there are restrictions on you from using a similar sounding name. Get in touch if you want more information regarding that, because it's a little bit of a tricky area, but yet there might be restrictions on using a similar name. And then the next question I get asked, and it's sort of a little bit of a controversial area, is, are there any hidden liquidation costs? So with Parker Walsh, no, there isn't. Essentially, the quote that we give you is the amount that you pay, and we will state whether or not that includes VAT, and it includes the disbursements and expenses, and that's usually what the hidden costs are, and those are the horror stories that you hear about. But we include it in the fee, so they're not extras. There's nothing down the line where you go, my God, I've got to pay that again. We just include it in the cost. The expenses can actually be quite expensive as well. So the statutory advertising. Every case, regardless of whether or not it's got assets, has to have insurance, which is known as a bordereau. So there's an insurance premium tax to pay there. and there can be others as well. But no, we include that in our costs, so that they aren't extras. I think it's always helpful that there's no surprises, that we always have a clear strategy with the director as to what they're paying and what the strategy for the liquidation is. So no, with Parker Walsh there isn't any hidden costs. And then in regards to the last question, and that is, how long does a liquidation take? Well, generally speaking, if it's a standard liquidation and we've got all the information we need, then it takes about 3 to 4 weeks from the initial advice call or meeting to the meeting that puts it into liquidation. So it's not that long at all. In a matter of a month, it could be in liquidation and we can take over as liquidator. Once it's in liquidation, again, it depends what assets there are, what creditors there are, if we're paying them any money back, known as a dividend, and then if there's any queries, investigations that we have to do, that can prolong it. But generally speaking, a liquidation can be tied up about 6 to 9 months later, and then it's eventually dissolved at Companies House. So I hope that's helped. They are the most common questions I get asked, and those are the answers. Okay, thank you.